about a risky thing to do. Wow. Yeah. Wow. So I was thinking back, I had a sort of a flashback this morning to a colleague of mine who used to be at Mission United in Pelkey, John Audio, who some of you will know. And John used to always say, there are two things you don't want to know about in the world that you don't want to see happen and know how they happen. And one is sermon writing and the other is sausage making. But I have a question for the two of you. How, Ellen and Laura, how do you, what's the process by which you come up with your dialogues here? I mean, you don't have to answer that, but I would be really curious to know if that's a happy hour thing or what, you know, so maybe that's the third thing we don't want to know, how they come together. So, yeah, all right. So if the question that I've been dealing with in the last couple of months is if you had 3 to 5 minutes to share your life learnings about what is important specifically to you as part of a community that worships together. If you had 3 to 5 minutes to share that, what would your words be? Words are important, and all of you and all of us together who speak those words in the many ways that we communicate are needed. And again, I thank you for being a community that does that well. And the reason I've been thinking about all these things is I had an interesting and challenging opportunity this last weekend, and I've been preparing more for that than I have anything in my life, I think, as far as a talk goes, because it was our yearly Synod Assembly of the Northern Great Lakes Synod of the ELCA in Marquette this past weekend, and retiring clergy, as I now am in a new category, were invited to share thoughts about their life in ministry in 3 to 5 minutes. And this was on a Friday evening at our banquet. You know, we hadn't gathered now for the last number of years because of COVID, and we had a chance to all be together again, which was a lot of fun. But I would like to share with you a version of the thoughts that I shared with the people that were there. And I will include some of the things that I had to toss or edit out to get it down to close to 5 minutes, but it won't be as long as I usually talk. But after I was done, you know, then I came down and they gave me a plaque that said something about your years of ministry and then a picture with the bishop. And she said, it was 8 minutes, but that's okay. But I would invite you, as I'm sharing these thoughts, to think of your own important words and thoughts to share somehow in this KUUF community, because that's how things happen, is when we share our ideas and our thoughts and our memories and recollections and hopes for the future with each other. So this is how I began. I didn't plan this, but as I was sitting there and the MC was introducing me, I thought, wow, I didn't know that was going to happen. But then I remembered that months ago I had written this little bio, you know, that I had to send into the Synod office. And as he was reading it, I'm thinking, well, how does he know so much about me? Because he's new to our Synod. But then I heard the words that I had sent to the Synod office. But one of the things was and I was reminded, I forgot that I had included this. Some of you know I like to clown around, and I have been a clown for many years. And I think I mentioned that maybe the first time I talked with you, and he mentioned that, and I thought, so I got up to this podium in this banquet room, and I thought, oh hell, I just have to do this. So I said, well, I can't help it. Here I am, clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right, and everybody hollers out, stuck in the middle with you. Yeah. But what I didn't show them was my tats. Clowns to the left of me and jokers to the right. And here I am stuck in the middle with you. Because I was too nervous. My legs were shaking, and you don't usually get an opportunity to do that kind of thing. But this is then how I had planned to begin. And this is what I actually scripted out. So this is what it means to win the church lottery. You work for 35 years to get a free retirement meal and 3 to 5 minutes to share your wisdom. But then I got serious. Finding a mission or a purpose in your community can be very tricky, but it is a beautiful and holy part of congregational life and ministry together. Thinking back to my first congregation in Chelan, Washington, they needed an intentional interim, highly trained pastor to come and deal with what was going on, and they got a rookie instead. One group in the congregation was very traditional, very old school about many things. The other, stereotypically, was mostly younger and more forward-thinking folk. There was a big influence in Chelan, Washington, with Holden Village being 25 miles up lake, a community, used to be a mining community that a guy that I happen to know in South Dakota bought and bought the town, and when the mine shut down, and sold it to the church for $5, I think, and it's now a retirement, or not retirement, it's an intentional community in the North Cascades. Well, a lot of the people that go to Holden Village would come back down and move to Chelan because they loved it so much, but these were very progressive thinking kind of people, and so you can imagine what would happen in a very traditional congregation with the influx of a lot of newer thoughts and younger people. It was a very uncomfortable mix, to put it lightly. But we loved each other as we had intense discussions and conversations and arguments and about many basic things. And as I now have recently learned, most of those things, thankfully, are no longer issues. But after about 20 years of having left that call, I returned on my sabbatical, which is now like 10 years ago, to discover a congregation that I had always dreamed of serving. Things had changed, and I was deeply touched to discover that they had an intentional ministry that I would never have dreamed of, and it wouldn't have been possible at that time. Of those two groups of opposite poles of people, they had little in common, except they were church and they were community. They all lived there and they all attended the same church. That's what they had in common. But the younger generation had begun to care for the older folks as they died. And as I read the description of this ministry, two of the names that of the elders that they used as examples in the write-up for their description of their ministry were two of the people that I knew quite well and had spent many, many hours with. And the younger group had decided to care for them as they died. And they created this book called Peace at the Last that is available through Augsburg if you're interested, full of words, music, and art done by the younger folks in the congregation who had those specific gifts. And they wrote this book about how to accompany people who are dying. The congregation made it through some difficult times by finding a ministry that was unique to them in their situation. So then years later, I became the pastor at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church and Lutheran Campus Ministry at Michigan Tech. And soon after I arrived, and this is all to the credit of this congregation, soon after I'd arrived, the people there found another intentionality besides campus ministry that they had done since 1960 when they were formed. And they then soon after I arrived, just about 4 years or 3.5 after I arrived, we had many discussions, and we added this statement to our mission statement and then put it in our weekly bulletins and publicize it and advertise it. These are the words: we are a reconciling in Christ congregation. We openly invite all, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, to join us in worshiping God and celebrating a relationship with Christ as our Savior. It's been 15 years now since ELCA Lutherans made formal decisions. I mean, this had been happening when I was in Chelan. This was happening in Holden Village, and it was happening, beginning to happen back in since 1970 something, when Lutherans Concerned North America was formed to address these issues. But it's only been, and I say only, I guess it's only been, or thankfully it's been 15 years now since the ELCA Lutherans made formal decisions to be more welcoming and inclusive in policy and practice regarding the LGBTQ community. Yet, at the same time, I have a regret there. There's still only 2 RIC congregations in this synod. Good Shepherd was the first, and Messiah and Marquette was the second. Some denominations, my own, Unitarian Universalists, Episcopalians, among others, are making great strides. Times they are changing. And we had a wonderful Synod assembly, and almost everybody that got up and talked reflected this new breath of fresh air that seems to be blowing through our world right now, at the same time that all this toxic air is also blowing through our world. But nationwide, you know, the welcoming community through what Reconciling Works is, the Lutheran organization. It's growing. There are now over 1,000 settings. Fortune Lake Bible Camp near Crystal Falls has begun a process with that hope in their hearts and in their minds. There are other congregations in our midst who are discerning how to move forward. And I do not know, maybe you know how many welcoming congregations there are in the UU Fellowship, but KUUF is one. I have no idea how many there are nationwide. And I'm so very thankful to be part of a group, your group, that is doing that. Well, as I think back now to those years, 2005 and 2006 at Good Shepherd, a handful of people left when we made that decision, and that really hurt a lot. But it's also true that some who would have left, had we not openly stated that they were welcome, as they are, some of those people stayed at Good Shepherd because they knew for sure now that they were welcome. It's not enough for those who are marginalized by church and society to simply hear words that say all are welcome, as many congregations advertise, but their experience of some people says they are not. In openly proclaiming our welcome, then I think back about those individuals who gained then a true church home. And then we all gained a mission and a ministry and identity. And it set a direction then for us at Good Shepherd that led to other ministries, because the times are always changing. So this whole movement is not about tolerance. It's not about being politically correct. We don't do these things expecting anyone new to show up. We don't do it hoping we might grow in numbers and suddenly have to have a whole new building because we're bursting at the seams. We proclaim an inclusive welcome because in our language as Lutherans anyway, in the ELCA, we would say Christ calls us to love God and love our neighbor. It's affirmation of who we are as the body of the risen Christ. It's simple, really. God welcomes and accepts us all, and then we do the same. And I've learned so very clearly from people in this community that we need to do it in public so people out there know there is a house of worship out there somewhere that will love them as they are, without trying to change them. So you advertise and you find gay yellow pages and you find Reconciling Works, and hopefully the UUs have a national database where somebody's traveling through your community, they would be able to find you. There are 2 fears that are found within many Lutheran congregations. I know for sure this because I hear it all the time. In other denominations, I'm sure it's the same. Number one is that people will leave if we get political. And number two is we are dying because we don't have any children anymore. I don't know how many times I heard that over this last weekend. The first is true. That if we get political, people will leave. The first is true in the sense that taking a stand on certain issues is a risk. But an even greater risk compared to the risk, an even greater risk is not taking a stand for what we believe. Because then why are we here? That risk that is ours is minuscule compared to the risk that so many people face each day of their lives, just being who they are born to be. So people need to know that there is a safe place, and they need to know there are people who care. So one of the questions I was asking these 70-some congregations within our synod in the Northern Great Lakes is, how might your congregation, how might this congregation here, KUUF, find its mission and ministry in this community? And I'm not saying you don't have one. I think you have a lot of them, but I was asking this, not a rhetorical question. I'm retired now. I can say whatever the heck I want, you know? How might all you folks out there find a mission and ministry in your community? There are many concerns. And this is something I've learned over the years too, that it's not just about what I think is right, but there are, that's been a hard lesson to learn. There are many concerns that need our hearts and our minds and in our hands. Food insecurity, the loneliness of elders, from where this book came. Climate change, gun rights, gun violence, white nationalism, racism, immigration, the treatment of indigenous people in church boarding schools, and the return of land stolen from them in broken treaties. Part of the reason, I wasn't going to say all these things. I just thought, I'm not going to go to the Synod Assembly this year. I usually don't like them. They're kind of long and tedious. This one was great, but my wife, Julie, sort of blasted me one night and said, you got to say something. We were having one of our many happy hours where we wax eloquently and we argue vociferously. And she said, no, you have to say something to give hope to our younger clergy out there. So then I think now of many church members and many clergy and seminarians who want a congregation that's willing to have holy conversations about what it means to be a future church. And remember, I was addressing this to 250 people at this assembly. And so I said very pointedly, delegates, ask your pastor. And pastors, ask your delegates and your members, is there a conversation that could happen in your congregation? Pick an issue. Find one that springs up from your own group, but have that holy conversation. So at Good Shepherd, some of you might recognize this, we started flying this rainbow flag. We started flying this in front of the church on College Avenue. And as I learned from my colleague Rick Stenitis at the Canterbury House, it has to come in at night because somebody will steal it or vandalize it or whatever. And so I would, if I was there, I'd put it out and I'd try to remember to bring it back in at night. As we got more involved and in environmental concerns, we added an earth flag to that. And then inside we added the Keweenaw Faith United banner. And we know, and you know, that it means more than flying flags and hanging banners. But our identity needs to be made clear so people know who we are and where we are. And over time, as you can see, it became very faded and torn by the wind, and it was looking pretty washed out. It is looking pretty washed out. And then, see what I mean? Okay, I'll put it up here for now so you can see the difference. because I'm going to make a point about that. One day, a few years back, a young girl in our congregation, 11 years old, a little child, said, we needed a new flag. And so her parents and her younger brother and her younger sister gave us a beautiful rainbow and trans flag that now hangs in a very visible place where it would be very obvious if somebody tried to take it down. The other fear is that there are no young people in our congregations anymore. And addressing any of these issues that I've mentioned that we all face is no guarantee that they will come. Again, that's not the point. Our children need us in order to be safe and to be accepted as they are. We, and I remember I was saying this to Lutherans last Friday evening, we are a church that proclaims to be always reforming, always being made new. Those are our themes all the time. We Lutherans are always reforming, always being made new. So it is then in our daily lives of faith, lives within our families and our schools and our communities, our church and our congregations, that we can live the prophet Isaiah's words so that they are true in our lives. The wolf shall live with the lamb. The leopard shall lie down with the kid. The calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. So then since I was blasting away, I thought, I'm just going to say this. My former bishop was sitting down the front row, and he did not like what we did back in 2005 and 2006, and he let me know that back then. Times are changing. So I said, we need to do more than teach the creeds and the 10 Commandments in the Lord's Prayer. We need to do more than simply say, all are welcome. When we respond to Jesus' call to love God and love our neighbors as we love ourselves, we can have an impact in our communities and our world so our children can be safe and home in our care. So this is in part what has been important to me in my last 35 years of ordained ministry and the years leading up to my decision to be involved in religion and church. So every congregation, every denomination is different. And so my questions to you this morning is, what is important to you as an individual and as a fellowship, and how will people know that? Thank you. So our next hymn is Singing the Living Tradition as opposed to the Dead Words.